Beijing ends its latest military drills after just one day, but sends a record number of warplanes around Taiwan.
台独与台海和平水火不容。
China pressures Peru to reject Taiwan's envoy to this year's APEC meeting. A deadly Israeli airstrike in northern Lebanon, while Hezbollah rockets send hundreds fleeing for shelter in Tel Aviv. Plus, we explore the agricultural connection between Taiwan and Malaysia. Welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Joyce Tseng. One of the largest military drills China has ever held around Taiwan has ended, with Beijing deploying a record 153 aircraft to surround the country. Taiwan slammed the exercises as irrational and scrambled jets and warships in response. Washington also issued a statement calling Beijing irresponsible. Despite the condemnation, China remains undeterred, as Jaime Ocon reports.
Chinese naval ships, bombers, and advanced fighter jets, all operating around Taiwan. China held one of its largest war games around Taiwan on Monday. Beijing says these exercises, known as Joint Sword 2024B, practice controlling key ports and hitting military targets in Taiwan. In response, Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te called an emergency high-level security meeting, deployed Taiwan's own armed forces, and called the drills irrational. Taiwan's defense ministry says a record 153 Chinese military planes were spotted near the country during the 13 hours of the drill. Alongside them were more than 38 naval and coast guard ships practicing how to blockade the country. A Chinese aircraft carrier, the Liaoning, was also spotted operating off Taiwan's southeast coast.
它的存在还带了舰载的飞机，我想配合这一次联合利剑2024B，的的确确形成了一个在东西两侧对我们造成一定的这个军事压力。
Beijing says the drills are a warning against what it says are Taiwanese independence forces. They come after President Lai Ching-te gave a speech on Taiwan's National Day, saying neither the Republic of China, which is Taiwan's official name, or the People's Republic of China are subordinate to one another. It's a statement that angered China's government, as it sees Taiwan as a renegade province, despite never having controlled it.
我可以告诉你的是，台独与台海和平水火不容。台独势力的挑衅必然会遭到反制。那么，如果你关心台海的和平稳定，首先要做的是反对台独。
The U.S., which is obligated by law to provide Taiwan with weapons, said it was seriously concerned with Beijing's exercises. But this isn't the first time China has conducted large-scale drills. A visit from then U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in 2022 and Lai's inauguration in May this year also saw Beijing react with military exercises. And China's growing focus on blockading Taiwan allows it to pressure the country without firing a shot, complicating a U.S. response.
An invasion is the use of lethal kinetic force, and that would force the United States to make a decision whether to intervene or not. I think that some believe that a blockade puts the United States and its allies and partners in a bit of a quandary, because China would say, well, it's not a blockade, again, because Taiwan is not an international issue. Potentially that puts the onus on the United States or Taiwan to fire the first shot and be seen as the party that's escalating it.
China's military has vowed further action against Taiwan if needed, setting the stage for future drills. Defense officials in Taiwan say the increase in military activity is making it harder to tell what China is planning. And there's a concern that one day such drills could turn into an attack. John Su and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
As we've just heard, this is not the first joint sword exercise that China has launched this year. Beijing held similar drills simulating a blockade in May. To find out how the two exercises compare, Jaime Ocon spoke to David Sachs, a security analyst at the Council on Foreign Relations, a U.S.-based think tank.
David, I want to ask you, what's the biggest difference between Joint Sword A, when we saw back in May, and Joint Sword B that we just saw on Monday?
So I think on the one hand, the one striking thing of Joint Sword B versus A is actually that the duration of Joint Sword B was quite short, only around 12 hours. And so I think that, on the one hand, that's maybe less of a concern because you get into questions if it's a multi-day exercise about whether or not it's really a de facto blockade and whether it's going to interfere with international shipping in the Taiwan Strait and Taiwan's ability to import critical goods. What was more concerning about Joint Sword B versus A, though, was the involvement of the China Coast Guard. I mean, we all saw this photo that was tweeted out of the China Coast Guard literally encircling Taiwan. And, that is consistent with Chinese actions over the last couple of years, which is to use its law enforcement or lawfare toolbook to essentially try to assert that this is a domestic law enforcement matter, that the Taiwan Strait is not international waters, it's an internal waterway, and that, it controls the airspace and the seas around Taiwan.
What do you think is the most likely scenario that China would use to take control of Taiwan? Is it a blockade, or is it still the more traditional amphibious landing?
I think that most observers believe that it's not a blockade and then China stops and doesn't do anything. I think that many believe that it's a blockade that rolls into these other elements like, joint firepower strikes on Taiwan, softening up the island for an amphibious assault. So I don't believe that Beijing is going to implement a blockade, sit back and wait until Taiwan buckles. Because I think that one of the conclusions that it has drawn, especially after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, is that time is not on its side. That all things being equal, it wants this to happen before the United States can potentially intervene, before the United States can put together a coalition to levy sanctions and other measures against China. So, I don't think it's an either-or question anymore. I think it's a question of sequencing and timing of the various elements.
That was David Sachs from the Council on Foreign Relations. The drills coincided with former President Tsai Ing-wen's visit to Europe, where she called on democracies to unite in the face of authoritarianism. Tsai was speaking at a forum in Prague, where she met with the President of the Czech Republic. John Van Trieste has the details.
Former President Tsai Ing-wen shakes hands with Czech President Petr Pavel. It's a significant gesture, as China claims Taiwan as part of its territory and tries to block Taipei's officials, including those no longer in office, from attending international events like this. But this annual pro-democracy event, the 2000 Forum in Prague, isn't the sort of place where Chinese representatives are likely to appear. That's especially true given this year's host, as Czech President Petr Pavel has taken a hawkish stance towards both China and its strategic partner, Russia. In his remarks at the forum's opening, he even named China, though in conciliatory terms.
I consistently urge major global powers, and especially China, to use their influence to promote peace and international cooperation. This means not backing Russia's violent campaign, but also showing restraint in Taiwan Strait and addressing human rights violations at home.
Former President Tsai is here to speak on the conference's theme of proving democracy's resolve and resilience, and on Taiwan's commitment to democracy despite decades of Chinese threats.
Taiwan stands on the front lines of the assault. The most recent action taken is China's announcement earlier today for a military exercise called Joint Sword 2024B. For more than half a century, Taiwan has faced constant intimidation from the Chinese Communist regime, which has tried every possible way to annex Taiwan.
But Tsai said the world's democracies need to have each other's backs in the face of authoritarianism.
Unity and cooperation among democracies became most essential. Democracies need to send the signal that intimidation and use of force against any member would result in serious consequences.
But not all European countries are quite as willing to test China's patience as the Czech Republic. Tsai's tour of the continent will also include a stop in France. But a visit to London is off the table after the UK Foreign Office asked Parliament to delay an invitation, hoping to avoid disrupting an upcoming goodwill visit by the foreign minister to Beijing. Meaning the higher-level reception she had in Prague may remain an exception. Klein Wang and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
The host country of this year's APEC forum has rejected Taiwan's chosen envoy due to pressure from China. Reese Ayers has more on Peru's decision and who could be going instead.
China is once again exerting its pressure on the international community to deny Taiwan the right to political representation, this time at this year's Asia-Pacific Economic Forum, or APEC. APEC hosts Peru have said that they prefer an envoy without a political background, as decisions made by APEC are reached by consensus among member states. This being an Asia-Pacific forum, one of those members is of course China. It's safe to assume, and sources say, that Chen Chien-jen is too political for China's liking. He served as the Vice President of Taiwan under the Tsai administration from 2016 to 2020, and then as the Premier until 2024. Lai Ching-te originally picked him because of his experience in public health and biotech. Chen is close to the ruling Democratic Progressive Party and the Lai administration, both of whom China has open disdain for, which is why China likely vetoed him. Tipped to go in Chen's stead, though, Stan Shi, though it's yet to be officially confirmed. Being a tech entrepreneur, Shi is a suitable pick. For several years, Taiwan was represented at APEC by TSMC founder Morris Chang, so Shi would be another person from a similar mold. He founded the company Acer in the 1970s with just $30,000 in capital. It's now become one of the world's largest hardware and electronics companies. Shi also attended APEC Australia back in 2007. As a tech entrepreneur, Shi feels like a suitable replacement for Taiwan's representative, and other global leaders are likely to be excited by the prospect of meeting a top global tech leader. Luffy Li and Reese Ayers in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Shares in NVIDIA have closed at their highest ever, also boosting the stocks of the chipmaker's Asian suppliers, including Taiwan's TSMC. NVIDIA shares closed up 2.4% to lift the company's market value to nearly $3.4 trillion. It's close to overtaking Apple as the world's most valuable company, a title it briefly held in June. NVIDIA has been riding the massive boom in artificial intelligence, but the news comes as the U.S. considers whether to limit sales of NVIDIA's advanced AI tech to certain countries. South Korea's military has fired warning shots after Pyongyang blew up parts of the inter-Korean roads, once seen as a sign of cooperation. Tensions have been mounting between the two sides, with North Korea saying they would cut off road and railway links to the south. It's accused Seoul of sending drones across the demarcation line and over Pyongyang. South Korea has not confirmed whether it sent drones, but says its military is bolstering surveillance and readiness. Israel has launched a rare airstrike in the north of Lebanon, killing over 20 people. The strike comes as Israel continues to expand its multi-front war in the Middle East, despite growing international condemnation. Rosie Greninger reports.
Scenes of devastation in A2, a predominantly Christian village in Lebanon's north, after a residential building was hit by an Israeli airstrike. At least 22 people were killed, and that number is expected to rise, with many still trapped under the rubble. The target of the strike is unknown, but the small village had an influx of displaced residents from southern Lebanon, where for the last month, Israeli forces have been bombing what they claim are Hezbollah sites. Hundreds of Israelis were sent into air shelters as the armed group responded by firing 3 rockets at Tel Aviv. That attack intercepted by Israel's air defense system. But the Iron Dome failed to prevent a Hezbollah drone attack on a military base in northern Israel 2 days ago, which claimed the lives of 4 soldiers and critically injured at least 7 more. Speaking from that base, the country's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to push forward with their war against Hezbollah in Lebanon.
אנחנו נמשיך להכות בחיזבאללה ללא רחם, בכל חלקי לבנון, גם בביירות.
His comments as Israel expands their ground operation in southern Lebanon. The country is facing international criticism for injuring at least 5 members of UNIFIL, the UN's peacekeeping mission there. Italy, the UK, France and Germany released a joint statement condemning Israel's repeated attacks on the soldiers, while the EU appealed to Israel to comply with international law.
The 27 members agreed on asking Israel to stop attacking UNIFIL. Many European members are participating in this mission. Their work is very important. It's completely unacceptable attacking United Nations troops.
Netanyahu rejected accusations troops had deliberately targeted UN peacekeepers and repeated a call for UNIFIL forces to be withdrawn from combat zones. Israel is also facing international pressure against their continued bombardment in the north of Gaza. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, in the past 11 days, at least 300 people have been killed. An Israeli airstrike on a school claimed the lives of at least 22 of those, including 5 children.
The Secretary General condemns the large number of civilian casualties in the intensifying Israeli campaign in northern Gaza, including its schools displacing sheltered Palestinian civilians.
Meanwhile, protests have erupted in the US, demanding support and funding for Israel be halted, as the government rushes an anti-missile system to Israel amid fears an attack from Iran could be imminent. That as Israel continues to attack Iranian allies Hezbollah and Hamas in their multi-front war. Chris Ma and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up after the break, the Philippines accuses China's maritime militia of sideswiping one of its fishing vessels in contested waters.
For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. The Philippines says a Chinese militia boat deliberately hit one of its fishing vessels in the disputed South China Sea. The collision caused minor damage to the Philippine vessel and no one was hurt. The Philippines says the Chinese boat carried out dangerous maneuvers before the incident. It's the latest clash between ships from the two countries as Beijing and Manila try to enforce their claims in the waters. Russia's defense minister has met with Chinese military officials to discuss strengthening defense ties. After the meeting, the Chinese Defense Ministry said both sides want to strengthen relations and continue high-level communications. A post on the Russian Defense Ministry's Telegram account cites Minister Andrei Belousov as saying, quote, "The military departments of Russia and China are united in their understanding of the global order and how to act moving forward." A new government study shows that wage growth has hit a 10-year high. This comes as economists and researchers have raised concerns about Taiwan's stalling pay rates. To learn more about the implications of this study, Adil Brar spoke to Roy Ngeung, a fair wage advocate based in Taipei.
Taiwan's Budget and Statistics Department says that the average monthly earnings mark the highest growth rate in 10 years. Is this a positive development?
I think on the one hand, it is a positive development that wages are rising in Taiwan after wages have been growing quite slowly. But on the other hand, we have to also look at the base wage that the salary is being increased upon. Taiwan's salary, as compared to many advanced countries, vis-a-vis the cost of living is actually comparatively low. And even if wages are rising, it is based on the very low base, which means that workers are still not earning adequate wages for the cost of living.
The government says data shows the employers are willing to pay higher bonuses, which is driving the real wages. How much will this impact everyday people?
I think bonuses actually make up about a quarter of the total wages that workers are earning in Taiwan, which means that workers are actually at the mercy of the employers in terms of whether the employers are willing to give a higher bonus or a lower bonus, or if they are willing to work overtime work. But if the businesses are not willing to pay a bonus, this means that workers are only able to earn a low fixed pay that they are able to earn. The structure in Taiwan shouldn't allow businesses to have such a huge leeway in terms of how much they can decide in terms of the wages that workers should be earning. There should be an allowance for workers to earn a high fixed pay and for bonuses to make up the additional pay.
The study on wages did not take into account inflation. When inflation is taken into account, how positive is this wage growth for everyday worker?
We should really be looking at a basket of goods that are necessary for an individual to have basic spending on to ensure that they have basic necessities. However, the current wages are still pegged to inflation and do not adequately meet inflation. So if workers are not even able to meet an adequate basket of goods, when we do not then increase wages to account sufficiently for inflation, then it also means that not only do they not have enough to survive on, when wages are risen, it also doesn't ensure that their purchasing powers are maintained at the current level.
That was a fair wage advocate Roy Ng speaking about wage growth in Taiwan. Malaysia is working to become more self-sufficient when it comes to food production and has found a useful partner in Taiwan. In the latest installment of our Southbound series, Tiffany Wong explores the little-known agricultural link between the two countries.
Every day, 41-year-old farmer Li Fa-cheng tends to his crops in the rural village of Rasa, Malaysia, an hour's drive from the capital Kuala Lumpur. Many of his seedlings are from Taiwan, where he studied agricultural production, and he's using a planting technique that he learned there.
我们就会用特定的这样子的不织布的袋子，这个袋子的优势是它可以就是根系可以直接穿透。我们再把这个介质给放进去土里头，再把一颗，再把它定植起来，固定好，我们就可以移出去我们的这个育苗室了。
Lee returned to Malaysia 5 years ago to revitalize his father's farm, and he says it's techniques from Taiwan that have been key to the farm's production.
台湾教会了，给了我那个工具，我就要自己去用。这个也是我们木瓜苗好卖的原因。
With production going well, Lee has now set his mind on growing the farm into an even bigger business.
这边是我们农场正在兴建的一个咖啡厅的建筑。
Lee has dreams of turning his farm into a leisure farm, not just a place for production, but a space for people to learn about where their food comes from, plant and harvest crops, and consume the farm's products in a cafe setting like this, all in a day's visit.
这个休闲农业的这个概念是我在台湾这个升学的时候，在我升学的过程里头，我时常都会向校外去移动，校外去跑动，去吃吃喝喝玩玩这样子，那就可以看到台湾的农业其实不只是在做生产而已。
2 hours west, at a rice factory along the coast, another farmer is also using techniques from Taiwan to expand his business.
马来西亚这套机器是可以洒水的，可以洒水，可以出苗，通用的。这个技术是台湾引进过来的。
Alan Lim has grown his rice farm in the agricultural town of Second into an operation that also provides services to other farms in the area, giving his business extra income.
目前碾米厂是没有这个碾米，单单做米这块是没有生存空间啦。在我们公司的话，我们可以做其他的，我们可以做这个插秧，插秧这一块拿来补贴给我们的这个 碾米工厂，所以无形中救了我们的工厂。
Lim's factory was introduced to that technology early on.
From the seeding conveyors to the transplanters, these machines were all brought over from Taiwan to Malaysia over 2 decades ago. And with 2 transplanters, farmers can plant the equivalent of over 2 football fields of rice in just 2.5 hours. They say this has rapidly sped up their process in such a labor-intensive task, and that they'll keep using these same Taiwanese machines to do so as long as they can last.
Taiwan's Agriculture Ministry hopes that it can continue to share these homegrown technologies and strategies to improve the lives of Malaysian farmers, who it says it uniquely relates to.
我们跟马来西亚其实有很多，因为马来西亚的农民大部分都是华人，所以呢，他们的我们跟他沟通应该是无碍，而且相处的模式应该非常接近。 那我们跟马来西亚有一个很特别的，就是说我们有共通的农产品。
These farmers are already making the most of their connection to Taiwan, a relationship that Taiwan hopes to expand for the benefit of more Malaysian farms. Patrick Chen and Tiffany Wong in Second 10 Malaysia for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Be sure to visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media. We'll leave you with pictures of the Paris Motor Show, where electric vehicles are taking center stage. I'm Joyce. Take care and see you next time.
I'm Leslie Liao in New York City, and this is TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.